Welcome everybody. Good evening. Good to get together again. Nice to see everybody. Actually, I'd love to see your faces. So as we're here tonight to commemorate Teves, the Yom HaLila of the Alter Rebbe, of the Baal HaTanya, of the Rav, of the Litvak, call him as you wish. He had many names, wore many hats. He was a brilliant, brilliant person. So let's take a quick journey through his life. The Baal HaTanya was born on Chai Elul Shnas Nachas. That corresponds to 1745. He was born in the town of Liozna to his parents, Burach and Rivka, and there were three brothers, all three Talmidei Chachomim. His father was a man of means. They were direct descendants of the Maral of Prague, and his father was also a secret follower of the Baal Shem Tov. When the Baal HaTanya, when the Shnei Zalman was only 3 years old, for his Upshidden, his father brought him to the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe said to him that he shouldn't bring him again. The Shnei Zalman should find his own way towards Hasidus. When the Shnei Zalman was 13 years old at his Bar Mitzvah, he delivered his first public discourse, and people were amazed at him. They were very, very inspired. They couldn't have enough of it. They were so inspired that they accepted him into the Chevra Kadisha, and they actually wrote his name into the Pinkus, into the local registry, with glorifying terms. They gave him unbelievable titles reserved for Talmidei Chachomim, for the elderly, and for those of exceptional merit. The fame of the young Illa reached Vitebsk. It reached actually far and wide. And in Vitebsk, there was a wealthy Yid by the name of Rebbe Leib Segal. And he decided that he really wanted to have Reb Shneur Zalman as his son-in-law. And at the age of 15, Reb Shneur Zalman married his daughter, Shterna. As was customary in the time, affluent, wealthy parents would have their children living by them for several years so that they can dedicate their years to Torah. And so it was with Reb Shneur Zalman. He was living in the home of his in-laws. Now that he was married and he had a substantial dowry, they decided, Shneur Zalman and his wife decided to establish a fund to help those living in Eretz Yisrael. Shneur Zalman's father-in-law had dealings with a nobleman and with a hierarchy in his area where he lived. And he got to be very friendly with them. And over time, there were two opportunities that presented themselves that Shneur Zalman's father-in-law had them get to know his brilliant son-in-law. At one point, the governor in that city had a sundial that failed to work properly. So the Rebbe Leib brought his son-in-law, having been invited by the governor, to try to figure out what the problem was. The scientists and the local noblemen couldn't figure it out. They had no idea what the problem was. They couldn't get to the bottom of it. But Reb Shneur Zalman realized that the reason why the sundial was not working properly was because there was actually an obstruction that was created by trees that had grown tall at a certain distance, and they were obstructing the sun. Being a very ardent and gifted student with a brilliant mind, the Shnei Zalman had become proficient in the entire Shas and Poskim. And before he was only 18 years old, he already had mastered all of Shas and Poskim. And at that time, he realized that he really wanted to find a mentor, a guide, somebody that can actually help him reach a higher level of Avodas Hashem. At the time, there were people always wandering through the towns. And from local wanderers, scholars, he had heard about Mezritch. He had heard about the Mezritch Magid, and he was very curious. But he rather knew the motto of Vilna, that in Vilna, you teach how to master Torah. So this was a totally new idea to him that he was hearing from these wanderers. These wanderers told him that in Mezritch, there's a new derech. And that derech is that it teaches you that Torah can be a master over you. Vilna and Mezritch were two great Yiddish capitals and centers in Eastern Europe. So he was actually at a crossroad. Which should he travel to? Reb Shneur Zalman chose Mezritch. In Vilna, they taught how to master Torah, and he felt he had a handle on that. But in Mezritch, they taught how Torah can master you, and they taught how to daven. And that is what inspired him. He would learn Chasidus and how a Yid ought to daven. This was the turning point in his life. The Shneur Zalman's father-in-law was vehemently opposed to his going to Mezritch. He threatened to deprive his son-in-law and daughter of any further financial assistance. But she stood at his side, and she agreed to allow him to go to Mezritch for another 18 months. She even sold many of her valuables to be able to buy a horse and wagon for Reb Shneur Zalman to be able to travel there. And he went together with one of his brothers. On the way, the horse collapsed. And when the horse collapsed, and they were trying to figure out what was going on, in conversation, Reb Shneur Zalman realized that his brother hadn't taken leave of his wife. So he convinced him to return, and his brother returned back home, and he went on by foot all the way to Mezritch. His first impressions were not encouraging, but the Shneur Zalman decided to stay. And before long, he realized how saintly and learned the Mezritch Maggid was, Reb Dov Ber. And so he became a devoted disciple. Returning to Vitebsk after 18 months, as he had promised his wife, the Shneur Zalman was met with a great deal of animosity on the part of his wife's family and many other members of the community. But he also gained many, many followers, eager to learn about the derech of Chasidus, and their way of life. The Shneur Zalman went to Mezritch again and again. At the age of 22, he was offered the position of Maggid in his hometown of Liozna. And he continued to hold that position for another 30 years until after the arrest and liberation in the year 1800. When Reb Shneur Zalman was barely 25 years old, the Maggid chose him among his disciples, actually being the youngest one of them, to work on the Shulchan Aruch. It had been approximately 200 years since the Shulchan Aruch had been written, and the Maggid felt that it was time for him the Shulchan Aruch to be reworked. In those 200 years, there was a lot of new halachic responses. Time has changed, and he felt that somebody needed to go through all the paperwork and everything that had come up in all those years, and he chose Shneur Zalman to go through it. And that's what he did. And that was actually what became known as the Shulchan Aruch Harav. It was based on the Shulchan Aruch with all the changes and all the additions that he saw fit. Several years later, he worked on the Likut Amudim Tanya, and then feeling that the Hasidim really needed to daven ba'arichas and to daven with devotion, he established the Siddur based on the Sechari. The burden of leadership began to weigh heavily upon him, and he begged the people that for the Gashmis, the issues that they have, their struggles, they should turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and they should come to him only with their rachnias, with their derech avoda. And he therefore wrote the Tanya, and he said that that was an answer to all their questions in Avodas Hashem. When he was 53 years old, a group of extremists among the opposition denounced Reb Shneur Zalman and some of his leading Hasidim to the Russian authorities in Petersburg as traitors to the Tsar. The false accusations were well timed. The fact that the Alter Rebbe collected funds for Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, which was then under the Turkish Empire, was used by these slanderers as evidence that the Baal HaTanya was an enemy of Russia. And the day after Simchas Torah, the Baal HaTanya was imprisoned. He was imprisoned for 53 days that actually correspond to the 53 Prukim in Tanya. But on Yites Kislev, he was vindicated. The Baal HaTanya lived in Lyazna and later in Liadi, but he was laid to rest in Haditz, having fled Napoleon in the time of war. He passed away on Chov Dalet Teves, Tov Kif Ayin Gimel. That's actually 208 years ago, when he was 68 years old. And now we're honored to have Mrs. Sara Blau, an author and prolific writer for Chabad.org, and a high school teacher and extracurricular advisor in Beis Rivka, and a loving mother to her kinderlach. So welcome, thank you so much. She will expand on the topic, why the Baal HaTanya chose Mezritch over Vilna, Tefillah over learning.
Okay, sure. Thank you for the introduction, and good evening to everyone who we see, who we don't see, the wonderful blessings of a virtual reality. There was a flight that took off from New York to Tel Aviv that had 103 passengers on the flight. And shortly after takeoff, the flight attendant makes a nervous announcement. She says, "I'm really, really sorry to all our esteemed passengers aboard this flight, but we just discovered that instead of 103 meals, we only have 40 dinners. And I'm so sorry." And passengers were right away angry. And what is this? And how could, I'm never flying this company and I'm going to sue them. And anger erupted. And when the passengers calmed down a little, the flight attendant continued and she said, "If there's anyone on this flight that would be kind enough and would be willing to give their meal up to somebody else so that the other person can have food, let me know. And if you're willing to give up your meal, then I will give you some free ear mile points." A few minutes later, she made the following announcement: "If anybody wants to change their mind, we still have 39 dinners available." What happened? When the passengers heard that there are 103 people and only 40 are going to get dinners, I wanted it. It's a 12-hour flight. Are you kidding? The second she dangled in front of them, "You give up your meal, you're going to get free ear mile points." I'm going to get mileage? What's a meal? I could go 12 hours. How many ear miles will I get? Will I get a free flight? Because really, it's all about priorities. What's more important, your meal or the ear miles? And the truth is that our entire day is really full of priority juggling. Do I have time for this? Do I have time for that? Where am I going to put my effort? How am I going to spend my time? Do I have time for this meal? Do I not have time for the meal? We're all juggling priorities. And when it comes to davening, it's not different in terms of where we fit it into our day. I'm a busy mother. I have a little kids. I have a job. I'm running. There's an appointment. Do I have time for davening? Don't I have time for davening? And sometimes it's really a matter of priority. What's my priority and what do I have time for? So I wanted to share a little bit of what my experience was over the past few months. Davening was always something that I would say is challenging for me. I found it a little bit difficult to focus. And it was very easy for me to say, I'm swamped, I'm busy, and maybe do a short little speedy davening, but that's about it. And this was a couple of months ago. I was experiencing a certain fear and a little bit of negative emotions about something. I was really worried. I was really worried about something. And it was causing me this certain lack of menuchas hanefesh. So I reached out to a friend, a colleague, someone older than me that I look up to, and to give her credit, her name is Miriam Yerushalmi. She's an author of many children's books. I have written a number of children's books. We collaborated in some books together, and I spoke to her, unburdened myself a little bit. She has a background in Hasidus. She's a therapist. And she said to me, "Do you make time to daven?" So what does that have to do? I'm talking to you about something. Could you help me work through that? And she said, actually, we'll get to what you want to talk about, but it has a lot to do. Because the process of davening and the preparation and the learning and the meditation will actually help you calm down. I was a little bit uneasy when I hung up the next day because I felt like she don't help me. And the next morning, I'm on a WhatsApp group where we get these daily letters on Emunah and Bitachon, letters from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the following morning, there was a letter written to a woman, and permit me to read and quote what the Rebbe says in this letter. Besides, there is nothing more conducive to attune the mind and heart towards the consciousness of Hashem's presence than regular prayer, where the first condition is da lifnei miyat ha'emet. And then the Rebbe continues, fostering this consciousness is very helpful for the attainment of peace of mind and general contentment. And the Rebbe goes on and on and on and saying, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, and the Rebbe ends off, this is not a theoretical idea. This becomes a personal experience in everyday life. And the truth is, I was really mind blown because I had this like picture in my head that davening, ba'arifos, ba'avaida, learning before davening, and really trying to have a davening experience was a man thing. You know, I pictured Hasidim in Russia in the 1800s. But here I was getting these messages and I was realizing that the experience of davening, rather than just opening my siddur and mumble jubbling, was actually for me as a woman. And the same way I could give up a meal if I know I'm going to get air mile points, I could give up something in my day if I know that it's so much more important. Because I do make time for the important things in my day. I eat every day. I sleep every night, maybe not as much as I would like to, but like if something is necessary. And suddenly like it clicked. Davening is something I need in my day. If I wanted to lead spiritually, I needed to relearn how to daven. And that reminded me of the story that Mrs. Oberlander shared of the Alter Rebbe. He was a genius. He knew how to learn. And that's why he didn't go to Vilna. He came to the Maggid to learn how to daven. And I felt like I had to do that. I made a decision, took the Sefer, Chassidus Mugueres, Avaydus HaTfilah, and I said, I'm going to learn about davening, I'm going to work on my davening, and I'm going to learn how to daven. And so what I wanted to share with you is a couple of thoughts that completely revolutionized the way I daven, the way I look at davening, and the how of davening. Other than just saying words, what am I supposed to think about? And it has been really, really, really life-changing for me. So the first shift, I want to go through 5 points. The first shift that I discovered about davening as I was learning, and again, these maimarim, I didn't say before, are maimarim from the Alter Rebbe, whose Yahrtzeit is tonight, Lakotei Taira, Taira R. And the first shift that I had was what's happening when I'm davening. And I like to think of it like, you know, imagine, go back in time to when you were a child and you heard adults talking. And you might have even heard adults mentioning your name. And they're in another room and they're shushing, they're having a conversation. What happens to your ears? They perk up. I remember countless eavesdropping conversations as a child. When it comes to davening, who's doing the talking and who's doing the eavesdropping? It was like a mind shift for me to realize I'm saying words for myself to hear it. I'm not davening for the sake of my neshama, for my nefesh kids. My neshama already loves Hashem. My neshama already is connected to Hashem. The actual purpose of me saying the words is for me to listen to them. It was like, oh, I never realized that. But I have kavana and I'm talking to Hashem. I never realized the whole idea of davening was for me, for my nefesh habahamis, for my animal soul, for my brain, for my psyche, to hear what I'm saying, to pay attention. And the Alter Rebbe describes davening as the song of the neshama. Shir hashirim, the neshama singing, and I need to let myself listen. And I do try to daven, whether, you know, my little kids are around, I try to sing and let myself hear. Because the whole point of davening is not to inspire my neshama. My neshama is already inspired. The whole point of davening is to get my nefesh Bahamas on board. That same nefesh Bahamas who really only cares about eating and sleeping, what happens when it starts paying attention? I start hearing myself saying so many words that are so beautiful in davening. That Hashem opens his hands and satisfies the desire of every living thing. I start hearing myself saying, and really like just listening to myself in Psukei de Zimra, describing Hameir La'aretz, the sun that's beaming on my face outside. Hashem is energizing it. I suddenly realized, like, it's not just about knowing the words, it's about listening. And that's what it means to meditate during davening, to have this bind in us, to think about, and it captured me as an artist. It captured my creativity, it captured my imagination to just vividly experience everything. And so that was the first shift for me. That my goal in davening is to connect to Hashem, right? Tefillah milashon of tafel, of connecting to Hashem with a taf, but by getting my nefesh Bahamas on board. The second shift that was new for me to learn was I didn't realize what the point of davening was. Obviously, we daven to thank Hashem and to praise Hashem and to ask for our needs, and that is a mitzvah. Levakesh etzrachav, we're supposed to ask Hashem for our needs. But I never realized how davening is a build-up. The whole process from brachos to Psukei de Zimra to Shema, the point was for me to experience loving Hashem when I say Shema. Again, it was something that I associated with these either spiritual people, tzaddikim, the idea that me and every average girl and woman could think thoughts that will make them love Hashem, and that is the purpose of davening. It didn't occur to me in that way. I'm learning the whole point, and now I want to be excited when I'm saying Shema. I want to feel it b'chol levavcha, two vases, with my animal soul and my godly soul. So the question is how? What could I think about? And again, it's all about being mizbaining and thinking about something. What could I think about that will get me from point A to point B? From waking up in this groggy, sense to feeling love of Hashem. I first have to tell you a story. There was once a group of scientists that got together and they said, listen here, men are smart enough. We don't really need God anymore. They picked one scientist to be the representative and they said, go tell God thanks. Like, we're good. We don't need you anymore. So the scientist goes up to God and he says, thank you so much. You did a great job. You were really great, God. We no longer need you. We could clone people. We could do miraculous things and we could take over. So Hashem listens very patiently. And he says, okay, I hear you. I have a suggestion. How about we make a contest? A man-making contest. Let's see who can make man better. The scientist said, sure. But God said, no, I don't want you cloning. Let's make a man-making contest, but we both have to do it like the good old days when I created Adam Arisha. Scientist says, sure. And he bends down and he grabs a handful of dirt to join the contest. God stops him and says, hey, go get your own dirt. Because even if man can create another man out of matter, who created the matter? And the Alter Rebbe says, what are we supposed to be thinking about during davening? What is Chassidus summed up in one concept. We're supposed to be thinking about the fact that Hashem created the dirt and the sun and the moon and the oceans and the beauty and the trees and everything. And this is something, the Rebbe says, we all know the information. You could all tell me that there's one Hashem and there's nothing but Hashem. But the Rebbe gives a very interesting mashal. Think about this for a second. You're in your house. You know your house pretty well. You know it inside out. But imagine you wake up in the middle of the night and you want to get a drink downstairs from your kitchen. And you're too tired to turn the light on. And so like you feel with your hands and you're walking from your bedroom to the kitchen. And you know your house inside out. You know exactly where the chairs are. You know exactly where the stairs are. But if the light is off, you can trip over a piece of Lego. Never happens to you, right? You can trip because the light might be, you know, you might know your house, but the light is off. You need to turn the light on. The Rebbe says our knowledge of God, our knowledge of Hashem, of Elikus, of holiness, we might know it, but that's like knowing your house inside out. You could still fall if you don't consciously turn on the light. The Rebbe says we could still fall. And by falling, it means not being in touch with our neshama, not being in touch with what Hashem wants, if we don't turn on the light. And davening is about turning on the light. Thinking, consciously thinking, every single thing that's happening right now, Hashem is recreating. Hashem didn't just make like there's Hashem and us. There's nothing but Hashem. And there's the reflection in the Zoom camera. I mean, it's me. It's not something, it's me. We're a reflection of Hashem, so to speak. And that's the key to coming to love Hashem. The Rebbe says if you sit during davening and you realize and recognize there's no duality, then what happens? What happens when I start thinking about that? I can easily channel my love to loving Hashem. I love my child that Hashem gave me. Who gave me this child? I like to play music. Anything that I love. Anything. I could so easily channel it. Like the Rebbe teaches at length in Tanya, different meditations that you could have to come into love Hashem. But they're all based on the idea of turning on the light switch. Turning on the light switch and not just knowing that there's an Eibush there. Turning it on so you see it clearly. Reminding yourself. And it works. When I consciously spend time thinking about it, it does something to my brain. It trickles down to my heart. It's very powerful. And the imagination is something that we're all blessed with. Davening is almost like an exercise of our imagination. We're very good at thinking. We're very good at thinking bad thoughts about ourselves. We're very good about thinking about excuses. We're very good at worrying. But when we take our mind and actively use it to imagine in our mind's eye such a clear awareness of Hashem, it impacts us. It actually takes the space of the negative emotion. And that's what the war is all about. Davening is a war. Our life is a war because I could either be thinking miserable thoughts or I could be thinking holy thoughts, and I can't be doing it at the same time. So of course the two souls are fighting inside my head. So when I'm going to spend time thinking, first of all, you know, besides the meditative aspect, sitting, thinking, and that automatically, there's certain, even chemically, certain hormones that get released. There's connection hormones and calming hormones. And I'm thinking, Hashem is running the world. I'm okay. And again, it just reminded me about that letter, about the knowledge, about Hine Hashem Nitzav Alav, Hashem is watching over us, how it really, really just changes us. That's point number 2. Going on to point number 3. Point number 3 was that it really could sound very lofty. The Alter Rebbe says, you just have to try a little bit. Hashem will already make it easier. The Alter Rebbe gives a very interesting mashal. The Alter Rebbe says, if there's a bucket of water, you just have to tip the bucket a little bit. You don't have to work hard to get all the water to pour out. You tip the bucket, what happens? The water will come gushing out. The Alter Rebbe says, our job is to try. Hashem will already make the water come gushing out. We just need to tip the bucket. Spend some time learning Chassidus before davening. Spend some time thinking about Hashem. So it was very reassuring for me. The Alter Rebbe explains that in the beginning of Shemana Esrei, when we say Hashem sifasai tiftach, ufi yagi tehilasecha, what are we saying? We're saying Hashem, open my lips, and my mouth is going to say your praise. Alter Rebbe says, I'm going to turn that around for you for a second. When ufi yagi tehilasecha, when I get my mouth to sing Hashem's praises, when I start doing the process that we said before, I'm listening, I'm eavesdropping. Hashem will open my lips. Hashem will make it easier. And progress in Avos Hashem that's way, way, way out of proportion to the effort that I put in, because that's the way Hashem works. We put a little bit in, and Hashem rewards us with so, so, so much more. That's 3. Going on to number 4. There was a chassid by the name of Reb Zalman Zezman. And he used to repeat the following story. That there was a lamdan in the days of the Alter Rebbe, not a chassid, that learned a lot. He was a baki b'shas. He was a real Talmid Chacham. And not only that, he also had good midas. He was warm, he was edel, he was kind. And he never understood the need for Chassidus. I learned, I have good midas. What do I need Chassidus for? What do I need to work on myself? What's the avodah that I'm needed for? And he came to the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe explained to him as follows. You know, even animals have midas, have certain qualities. A raven is mean. An eagle could be kind. Your natural good qualities are no better than your natural bad qualities. They're just like an animal. They're natural. You didn't work hard. You didn't work on yourself to become an eagle person. Chassidus demands a vaida. So I suddenly realized, like, oh, davening is not easy for me, and it's supposed to be that way. If davening came naturally to me, it's like anything natural. Hashem values effort. Hashem values the struggle. In fact, the Alter Rebbe explains that every single morning, the Malachim wait for Yidden to say Kadesh, Kadesh, Kadesh before they're able to say it. And the Alter Rebbe says, what? Malachim are Malachim. They're perfect. And people, there's no perfect person. There's no one who hasn't had an inappropriate thought, speech, or action. Maybe not everybody all 3. Maybe somebody just thought, different levels. I mean, we're so imperfect. And the Alter Rebbe says, it's dafka people that could say Kadesh, Kadesh, Kadesh. It's like imagine you lose something. And I remember I lost these glasses a few weeks ago, and it was like I couldn't see for a good week and a half. When I found them, there's a certain appreciation because I didn't have it, and then I found it. Oh, I could see. Great. Malachim, there's no kunz for them to say Hashem is holy, Kadesh, Kadesh. They never didn't believe it. They're so batal. There's no declaration for them to make. People that we have our doubts, We're not conscious of Hashem. We are conscious of Hashem. I lose my glasses, and when I find it, appreciation. When a Yid who is not always conscious of Hashem stops and says, Kaddish, 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 gives Hashem much more nachas. It's like turning on the light. And the advantage of light after it was dark. And so it was a new appreciation for the fact that it was hard for me, and to appreciate how much nachas Hashem has when I turn on the light. When I'm conscious of Him. When I say Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God, Hashem is mine because He's real to me. I'm not davening like a parrot because you told me to. I'm davening like with work and with effort and with thinking and with learning before davening and thinking during davening, and it's not perfect and I get distracted because I'm human, and I still say Hashem Elokeinu. There's nothing that brings greater joy to Hashem. And the last thing is, I learned that we could daven for help with davening. In fact, we do every day. Because our goal is to get to Shema, where we want to feel a little bit of love and Ahavas Hashem, a lot of the brachas that we say in the morning, when you learn them according to Chassidus, we're actually asking for Hashem, please help us see Hashem. Please help us have an aha moment where I get it. Oh, Hashem is recreating the world. And just to go into one example, one of the brachas that we say every morning is Hanaisein Lasechvi Bina Lahavchen Ben Yomu Ben Laila, that Hashem gives the rooster the wisdom to know the difference between day and night. Now let me ask you something. If a rooster was in a very, 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 very dark shed, would he still wake up at the crack of dawn? Would you hear the cock-a-doodle-doo? Or the opposite? If a rooster was exposed to light 24/7, would he still have the wisdom to know the difference between darkness and light? And the answer is yes. And science explains it is because a rooster has an internal clock, an internal circadian rhythm that knows when dawn is, and that's why it knows how to differentiate between, it has nothing to do with the light as much as its internal clock. But according to Chassidus, there's something deeper. There's a concept of a spiritual rooster. And the spiritual rooster is just like a rooster wakes us up in the morning, bright and early, 4 a.m. The spiritual rooster is the kayach and shemayim that wakes up the malachim, that wakes up the neshamas of Yidden and says, wake up, Yidden, wake up. Just like a rooster knows the difference between night and day. This sechvi, the level of sechvi above, knows the difference between good and bad, between holiness and not holiness. So when we're asking in the morning, we're not just talking about roosters. We're saying, Hashem, help us tap in. Spiritual alarm clock. Please, Hashem. It's so easy to get swept up with the reality of the world, with the news, with my own frustrations, with my.
Sorry, just 1 second. I don't know by everybody, by me, you were frozen. Do you want to just repeat that last line that you said about 30 seconds ago? Thank you.
Okay, sure. I didn't even realize that I froze. When I'm waking up in the morning, I'm asking Hashem to tap into that sechvi, to give me the ability to differentiate between what's real and what's not real, what's holy and what's not holy, what's light and what's dark. Because it's so easy to get swept in our own worries and resentments and our life and just go through the motion. So it's like the same way if I want to wake up in the morning, I put a physical alarm clock. Saying the bracha of Hanaisein Lasechvi in the morning, it's like turning on a spiritual alarm clock. I'm praying for hatzlacha with davening. That's my tefillah. And that was also I never thought of it before. I could ask Hashem, I could say, Hashem, I really want to daven, but help me. I know I'm supposed to love you. Help me. And the Alter Rebbe actually goes and explains the other brachas in that similar manner of what we're asking for. And the more you learn davening according to Chassidus, the more you see it's one buildup of a process here. We're trying to work on a relationship with Hashem. And this relationship with Hashem impacts us in every way. There's a story of Rebbe Meir Mishlan. It's a very famous story that he once decided he was going to go to the mikveh. Now he lived in Russia, and the path from his home to the lake or wherever he was going to be taival was frozen and icy. And there was a huge downhill, straight ice. And his Hasidim really were worried about him. He's an elderly man to go down a slippery slope, literally. But he went and he came back. They asked him, how did you do that? And what did he tell them? Then men is verbunden, when we're connected above, fällt man nicht. When we're verbunden, mit the Eibishter, when we're connected above, we don't fall. And so what happens is, and the Alter Rebbe talks about it, when we're connected to Hashem, automatically it helps us disconnect from physicality. What's physicality? It could be anything. It could be technology. We can get addicted to technology. We can get addicted to food. We can get addicted to shopping. It's like we're yanking ourselves away, not by saying, don't shop, don't this, don't that. It's an automatic thing. We're connecting above so we don't fall below. And the way the Alter Rebbe explains it is that we all have this kayach in our nefesh called Yahrtzeit, which means to bond. We're going to bond with something. That's the way Hashem made us. It's one of our 7 midas of how we relate. The solution, the way to not be bonded, to not have our Yahrtzeit, to not be so tied down and become a slave to physicality, to style, to mishagas, is by channeling our Yahrtzeit, by connecting to Hashem. When we work on our relationship, that will actually schlep us out of our, I would even use the word addiction, because on some level, we're all addicted to something. And the solution is the same. It's a spiritual, ruchnistic solution. Yahrtzeit, connecting to Hashem. So those were the 5 things, the main mind shifts that I had. And if we had this class in a few months, I hope I would have even more things. But one of the things that I was doing as I was learning is I started writing it on Chabad.org. And I told myself, that was part of my achlata. I said, I see the impact it's having on me. I want to be able to share it with other people. I want to be able to express what a gift that we have. And this is the purpose, this is the reason why we're here, to connect to Hashem. And it's going to impact us on every level, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I want to end off with a short little anecdote of my husband's grandfather, Rebbe Meir Aston. Somebody once asked him, Rebbe Meir, so schon geendigt davening? Did you finish davening yet? And he said, I finished mincha, but a yid never finishes davening. And so, a l'chaim, that all of us should never be finishing davening. We should continue to work, to grow, to learn, and to be inspired on the Alter Rebbe's Yahrtzeit, to learn his Torah, to learn Chassidus, and to really deepen our connection to Hashem. And of course, so that what's the purpose of the Chassidus and the spreading everything is for the ultimate connection that we're all going to have when Mashiach comes, when everybody's going to be aware of their connection to Hashem. So thank you for having me. I also wanted to share with you ladies a video of davening that was very inspirational to me and my friends. And so I would love to be able to ask Mrs. Overlander if you could just play that video.
When I used to go to the Yechidus with my children, which was very bria, but as need be, we did come with the children. And I come forward, I'm speaking to him, and he says to me, Ich will auch fragen, zu der davenst alle Tag. So I says to him, you're in trouble now. I says, because the Rebbe you can't lie to, you have to tell him the truth. And I said to the Rebbe, I think I say Shema every day, and I say brachas every day, but I can't really say that I daven every day completely because I have kleine kinderlach. I says, and it's very difficult for me to not be in tune to them because there's a lot to take care of with a growing family. And so I don't know if I have so much time to spend davening. He says, wenn du wolltest mir gefragt, wollte da geheißen ja, du sollst ja davenen. And sollst umfangen davening von Umfang. And alle Tag zugeben noch ein bisschen, bis du wirst alles davenen till the end. Daven everything a little bit at a time, add a little bit every day until you finish davening, the whole davening. And do that every day. And the children shouldn't be at your concern at this time, but you should get somebody to watch the children, so you should have time to daven. And so that's what the Rebbe's words were to me. I listened clearly, and I said to myself, this is going to be my new life and my new outlook, because I said, as today stands, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I says, I can still feel the Rebbe's words clearly responding to what I had to tell him and what he told me.
Thank you so much. The Eibush is helping that we should be able to bring heaven down to earth in our daily lives, because that's actually what we're doing. And when we have the koyach and we actually can daven like that, climb that ladder, get up there in our daily lives, it really puts us in a totally different place. So thank you so much. May we be zoiche that our tefillas actually bring us to the ultimate that we're all begging for and waiting for, the coming of Mashiach. May we be zoiche. Thank you so much to all of you.